Boys and girls, in lesson 4.1, our essential question that is going to guide our learning is how can you use drawings and place value to multiply a decimal and a whole number? So today we're going to focus on the multiplication of decimals with whole numbers, and we're going to start up at the top with our real world unlock the problem. So in 2010, the United States Mint released a newly designed Lincoln penny. A Lincoln penny has a mass of 2 5/10 grams. If there are 5 Lincoln pennies on a tray, what is the total mass of the pennies? So boys and girls, we're going to come to the right-hand side of our page and we're going to fill out our blue graphic organizer box, which is going to help us extract the important information for the problem. So when we start off at the top, it says, how much mass does 1 penny have? If we go back into the original problem, boys and girls, we see that 1 penny has the mass of 2 5/10 grams. Next, boys and girls, we're going to go to the next question. It says, how many pennies are on the tray? If we go back into the problem, boys and girls, we see that there are 5 Lincoln pennies. So what we're going to write down here is 5 pennies. Now, boys and girls, it's asking us to use grouping language to describe what you are they're asking us to find. So boys and girls, if we're going to use grouping language, we're saying that we are looking for 5 groups of 2 5/10. So what we're going to do, boys and girls, is we are going to use our first strategy today, which is using place value to multiply. So what we're going to do is there's 2 parts in this. We're going to model first, and then we are going to multiply, and we're going to use our understanding of rounding and estimation in helping us do so. So boys and girls, we are going to look at our model. I'm going to rewrite the number problem on the side. Remember, it was 5 groups of 2 5/10. So let's check and see if we have 5 groups of 2 5/10. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 1 group of 2 5/10, 2 groups of 2 5/10, 3 groups of 2 5/10, 4 groups of 2 5/10, and 5 groups of 2 5/10. Now, boys and girls, what we're going to do is we are going to multiply. And what we're going to do is we are going to kind of go back and forth between our model. But remember, when we're multiplying, we're always saying to ourselves, like, how can we regroup? So remember, we talked last week and the last couple weeks, remember, whenever we get past 9 ones or 9 tenths or 9 hundredths, we can always regroup. So boys and girls, if we look here, we see that there are 5 tenths, and then there's another 5 tenths. So that would give us 10 tenths. If we cross those out, boys and girls, we can trade for 1 whole. Again, boys and girls, we see that we have 5 tenths and another 5 tenths. Together we have 10 tenths, which we can trade for another 1 whole. So boys and girls, in this model, we can actually count out the answer to this multiplication problem without even doing any paper and pencil math. So let's count it out. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 ones, and we can count our tenths. We have 1 tenth, 2 tenths, 3 tenths, 4 tenths, 5 tenths. So we know that our product, which is our answer in multiplication, boys and girls, is 12 5/10. Now this is one strategy which we can use, the model. We're going to do part 2 of this strategy, which is our think and record. So on our think and record part, boys and girls, what we're going to do is we are going to estimate our product. And now estimate means, remember, it's not the actual, but whenever you hear words like about, it's asking you to get an estimate. So what we're going to do is we're going to round the decimal to the nearest whole number. So what I'm going to write down here on the side is our decimal. We have 2 5/10, and it's asking to round to our nearest whole number. So we're going to circle our whole number, which is 2, and we're going to look next door. Boys and girls, remember, if we look next door and that number is a 5, a 6, a 7, an 8, and a 9, we're going to round 1 up. Boys and girls, if it's a 4, a 3, a 2, a 1 or a 0, it's going to stay the same. So when we look next door, boys and girls, we see that there's a 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to mount 2 and 5/10 to be 3. Now, boys and girls, we're going to estimate. 3 times 5 is 15. So our estimate is going to be 15. We know that we want to check our actual against 15 at the end to see if it's reasonable. So now step 2, boys and girls, it says to multiply the tenths by 5. So when we get 5 times 5/10, we get 25/10, but we know we can trade 25/10 to be 2 ones and 5/10. Because remember, boys and girls, to have 25 dimes is the same as having $2 and 5 dimes. Next, boys and girls, we're going to multiply the ones. So remember, the first thing we did was we multiply the tenths, and next, boys and girls, we are going to multiply the ones out. So now, because we multiplied out the ones already, boys and girls, we are going to leave a space there. Because we've already multiplied the ones, we're not going to want to do any multiplication anymore there. So notice we're going to come up with partial products, which is something we did with whole numbers. So let's multiply it out. 2 ones times 5, boys and girls, would be 10. Notice 5 times 2 ones is 10 ones, or 110. So, boys and girls, think about it. You can have $1 bills and have 10 of them, or one $10 bill. They both would give you the same amounts. Now, boys and girls, the last step is to add the partial products. So we're going to add up our partial products. We have 5 tenths plus no tenths, which is 5. 2 ones plus 0 ones is 2. 1 10 plus no tens is 1. So our answer, boys and girls, is 12 and 5/10. And if we go back and check it up against our original problem, boys and girls, 15 is very close to 12 and 5/10. So 5 Lincoln pennies have a mass of 12 and 5/10 grams. Now, boys and girls, we are going to go on to the second strategy. Now, remember, the first strategy we did today had 2 parts. This second strategy only has 1 part. And what we're going to use is place value to help us analyze patterns and help apply that to multiplication of decimals and whole numbers. So, boys and girls, we're going to start with our second strategy of the day, which is use place value patterns. Having a thickness of 1 35/100 millimeters, a dime is the thinnest coin produced by the United States Mint. If you stacked 8 dimes, what would be the total thickness of the stack? Now, boys and girls, if we're going to use grouping language, we can see that we have 8 groups of 1 35/100. So we're going to start with step 1 down here, boys and girls. Step 1, it says write the decimal factor as a whole number. Now, if we look at our problem, boys and girls, we see that 1 35/100 is the decimal factor because it's the only factor that has a decimal point. Now, boys and girls, in order to create 1 35/100 and create it into a whole number, we have to multiply by 100. And you might say, well, why is this the case? So, boys and girls, keep in mind that you want to make sure that you take your decimal, which is, again, 1 35/100, and multiply it by 100. Because remember, when you multiply it by 100, because there's 2 zeros, you're allowed to move 2 decimal spaces, and your new number would be 135. So let's make sure that we follow through the steps. When you multiply 1 35/100 times 8, what you're going to do is you're going to come up with your... So if you look from left to right, boys and girls, when you multiply by 100, you get 135 times 8. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply our number normally, and what we get is 1,080. Now, boys and girls, keep in mind that our original number was not 135, it's 1 35/100. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 1 35/100 and we're going to multiply it by 100th, and we're going to multiply that by 8. So, boys and girls, our answer is going to have the same exact digits. However, we're going to check. There's 1, 2 decimal places in the first factor. There's 0 decimal places in the last factor. That means in our product, we're going to move 2 decimal places from the front to the back. So we're going to move 1, 2, and our answer is, boys and girls, 10 and 8/10. So a stack of dimes would have a thickness of 10 and 8/10 millimeters. So now we're going to go on to our explanation, which says, explain how you know the product of 8 and 1 35/100 is greater than 8. So boys and girls, what you can do is you can think about this as being money. If someone says, I'm going to give you 8 times $1.35, we know that 8 times 1 is always 8. So if you have 8 groups of $1, you'd have $8. So if you know if this amount is greater, 1 35/100 is greater than 1, you know that the product is going to be greater than 8. So boys and girls, again, remind yourself, I know that 8 times 1 is 8. So a number greater than 1, like 1 35/100, multiplied by 8 would result in a product greater than 8. Now, boys and girls, it says, what if you multiplied 35/100 by 8? Would the product be less or greater than 8? And most importantly, it says to explain. So boys, keep in mind that benchmark fraction factor times factor equals product that we're using. It says, I know that 8 times 1 is 8, so a number less than 1, such as 35/100 multiplied by 8, would result in a product less than 8. And keep in mind, boys and girls, you know that 8 times 1 is 8. So if you're talking about a number that's less than 1, the product here would have to be greater or less than 8. It would have to be less than 8. 8 times 0 is 0. Is that greater than 8 or less than 8? That's correct. It's less than 8. So boys and girls, I'm going to go through one more problem, which is a common error, and I'm going to go through the example and use both strategies that we used today in the lesson to help you understand and apply your knowledge. So boys and girls, in the problem that we have here, we have 5 times 3 17/100 is equal to 1,585. And this answer, actually, boys and girls, is not correct. And this is a common error, is that most students forget to place the decimal point after multiplying the problem as though it's a whole number. So if we look at the original problem, we know that in strategy number 2 today, it would say multiply this as though this was a whole number. So we went through and we multiplied this as if it was a whole number. We would do 7 times 5 is equal to 35. So we write down the 5 and we would regroup the 3. 1 times 5 is 5 plus the regroup 3 is 8. And then 3 times 5 is 15. Now, boys and girls, we multiplied this as though this was a whole number. We pretended that 3 17/100 was actually just 317. But we know that there are 2 decimal places here. So boys and girls, that means that when we go to the back of the product, we know that we have to move 2 decimal places. So 1, 2, our actual answer, boys and girls, would be 15 and 85/100. So a common error is when students use multiplication patterns and decimals, they forget to place the decimal point. Also, boys and girls, you can use the quick drawing if you like as well to solve this problem. I would suggest that you use whichever one that you feel like you struggle a little bit more with.